Majid Alibadi likes to be flashy, flaunting his taste in exotic cars the last time he was granted bail. After being re-arrested, he's making a fresh bid for freedom. But in opposing bail, police revealed they have significant surveillance material suggesting he's a key player in Melbourne's tobacco wars.
You've just seen it. A man in designer clothes, flanked by detectives, being marched away from a luxury car under the glare of police lights. That man is Majid Alibadi, 25 years old, well-dressed, well-connected, and now accused of being one of the central figures in a violent and escalating turf war across Melbourne. The war wasn't fought with bullets, it was fought with fire. Over just 18 months, more than 80 tobacco stores across Victoria were targeted. Some were torched, others were sprayed with bullets. All were left with a clear message: sell black market tobacco or burn. Police say Alibadi wasn't just involved. They allege he helped run it. Acting on orders from alleged crime boss Kazem Kaz Hamad and his brother Matham, Alibadi is accused of coordinating firebombings, mapping out escape routes, and laundering dirty cash while living like a king. $30,000 shopping sprees, luxury dinners, and a rotating garage of exotic cars. It all came crashing down when Task Force Lunar moved in. The handcuffs went on, and the man once seen cruising Melbourne's streets in Rolls-Royces was suddenly at the center of one of Australia's most dangerous underworld crackdowns. Majid Alibadi was 25 years old when police arrested him in connection with a series of arson attacks targeting tobacco stores across Victoria. Authorities alleged he was a key player in a coordinated extortion campaign aimed at forcing shop owners to either sell black market tobacco or abandon the trade altogether. The wave of attacks had escalated rapidly. Dozens of stores were firebombed, shot at, or threatened. In response, police launched a special task force to investigate the growing number of incidents, eventually identifying Alibadi as a central figure. Investigators alleged that Alibadi had been appointed as a local operator by two men who were believed to be orchestrating the campaign from overseas. His role, according to police, was to oversee the attacks on the ground, pass on instructions, and assist in planning the logistics behind each incident. Evidence presented to the court included encrypted messages and surveillance showing Alibadi mapping out potential targets and advising others on how to approach them. In some cases, he was accused of using online tools to plan escape routes and monitor the layout of areas surrounding the stores. At the same time, Alibadi was living a lifestyle that drew attention. Despite having no visible source of income, he was regularly seen shopping at high-end boutiques, dining at expensive restaurants, and traveling in luxury vehicles. On one occasion, he spent $30,000 in a single day at a designer store. This level of spending, combined with his alleged involvement in the coordinated attacks, raised suspicions that he was being financially supported by those behind the operation. Police believed the lifestyle was funded through the profits of the illicit tobacco trade and possibly other forms of organized crime. In total, Alibadi was charged with 22 offenses, including arson, reckless conduct endangering life, extortion, and dealing with proceeds of crime. Authorities described him as a trusted member of the network, someone who carried out orders, but also helped manage logistics and communicate with others involved. His arrest came as a significant breakthrough in the investigation, and police hoped it would lead to more arrests and greater insight into how the broader operation was functioning. The court ordered that he remain in custody while awaiting trial, citing the seriousness of the allegations and the risk of further offending. For investigators, the case against Alibadi represented not just a single arrest, but a key moment in a much larger effort to dismantle a violent and growing criminal network operating across Victoria. What began as scattered attacks on small businesses had grown into a statewide campaign of fear and intimidation, and Alibadi, they alleged, was right in the middle of it. By late 2023, the attacks were no longer isolated incidents. Melbourne was experiencing a wave of violence unlike anything the tobacco industry had seen before. More than 80 tobacco shops across Victoria were targeted, many of them firebombed in the dead of night, while others were sprayed with bullets or left with threatening messages. The pattern was always the same. Storefronts were torched using jerry cans of fuel or Molotov cocktails. Windows shattered, roofs collapsed. In some cases, the fires spread to neighboring businesses. Security footage often showed masked men arriving in stolen vehicles, carrying out the attack within minutes, and fleeing before emergency services arrived. For small business owners, the message was clear: comply or suffer the consequences. Police believed the violence was part of a turf war over control of the black market tobacco trade. Illicit tobacco was big business. Sold under the counter or through unregulated supply chains, it offered huge profits with relatively low risk compared to drugs or firearms. That made it attractive to organized crime groups and dangerous for anyone who stood in the way. Some store owners reported receiving phone calls and text messages warning them to pull legal cigarettes from their shelves and sell only illicit stock. Others found threatening notes taped to their doors. A few refused to cooperate, and within days, their shops were burnt down. The fear spread quickly. Business owners in suburban strips began installing reinforced shutters and CCTV. Many simply stopped selling cigarettes altogether. Some closed down entirely. Police said the violence was being orchestrated at a high level, with orders being issued through encrypted channels and executed by younger foot soldiers on the ground. Alibadi was allegedly one of the key figures coordinating the chaos. His communications showed a level of detail and planning that suggested the attacks weren't random. They were part of a broader strategy to dominate the market. The financial scale of the conflict was also becoming clearer. With legal cigarettes heavily taxed, black market tobacco offered a way for consumers to buy cheaper, unregulated products. Criminal groups were importing illegal tobacco in bulk, sometimes hidden in shipping containers, and distributing it through a network of compliant retailers. But with profits came violence. Fire crews were responding to multiple tobacco store fires each week. The cost of the damage ran into the millions. Insurance companies began raising premiums or refusing to cover businesses involved in tobacco sales. Communities were on edge. What had once been a niche criminal activity had spiraled into a full-blown public safety crisis. Task Force Lunar expanded its operations, bringing in additional investigators, intelligence analysts, and surveillance teams. Their goal was to identify those pulling the strings and those carrying out the orders. Majid Alibadi, police believed, was doing both. The pressure was building, and behind the scenes, detectives were preparing to make their move. By early 2024, Victoria Police had developed a clearer picture of how the network operated and who the key players were. The arrests weren't rushed. Detectives from Task Force Lunar spent months watching, listening, and collecting evidence. They tracked movements, intercepted encrypted messages, and quietly documented every connection. Majid Alibadi had become a person of interest long before his name reached the headlines. Surveillance teams had followed his routines, capturing footage of him visiting known associates, scouting store locations, and meeting in car parks late at night. They noted his habits, his preference for high-end restaurants, his visits to designer stores, and his consistent use of rental luxury cars that changed every few weeks. Undercover officers and digital analysts pieced together timelines that aligned suspicious movements with confirmed attacks. In some cases, vehicles linked to Alibadi were caught on CCTV near stores that were later firebombed. Police also obtained warrants to monitor his communications, including chats sent via encrypted messaging platforms. Inside those chats, they found references to store names, street addresses, and coded phrases believed to be instructions or status updates. Messages discussed whether a store had cooperated, whether work was needed, or whether it was handled. Investigators believed these were not vague business discussions. They were operational details about planned arson attacks and intimidation tactics. One chat even included images of shopfronts taken from Street View maps with the message, "Use this side to exit, less traffic." Police saw it as a sign of planning, not impulse. The surveillance operation wasn't just about building a case against Alibadi. It was about understanding the wider structure of the network. Detectives identified other figures who appeared to be acting under his direction. Men seen pouring fuel, scouting stores, or delivering threats. Police suspected that Alibadi wasn't working alone, but as part of a coordinated team that received orders from overseas and carried them out locally. Over time, evidence mounted. Financial records showed large amounts of unexplained cash flowing through accounts tied to Alibadi. Images of his luxury purchases, including expensive clothing and accessories, were saved as exhibits. Despite having no clear job, he was living far beyond his means. By the time police moved to arrest him, the case was tightly built. There were surveillance logs, digital footprints, financial records, and witness statements. On the day of his arrest, detectives executed multiple search warrants across Melbourne. Alibadi was taken into custody without incident. Police seized phones, documents, and other electronics. Forensic teams began examining the data, hoping to find more connections and evidence of planning. Alibadi was charged with 22 offenses, including arson, reckless conduct endangering life, extortion, and dealing with proceeds of crime. The sting marked one of the most significant breakthroughs in the task force's operation. But even with Alibadi behind bars, detectives knew the job wasn't done. The network was larger. The orders were still coming in from overseas, and Melbourne's tobacco wars were far from over. Majid Alibadi wasn't the top of the chain. Investigators believed he was a trusted middleman, someone given serious responsibilities, but still acting on orders passed down from others. At the top, police identified two key figures, Kazem Kaz Hamad and his brother Matham. Though both were based in Dubai, their names appeared repeatedly in encrypted messages and financial trails linked to the arson campaign. Authorities alleged that the brothers were overseeing a multi-million-dollar operation importing illicit tobacco into Australia and using violence to secure exclusive distribution across Victoria. From their base overseas, the Hamads were believed to be coordinating with local actors like Alibadi. They allegedly issued instructions, settled disputes between street-level operators, and managed the flow of black market tobacco into stores. Police suspected they maintained control through encrypted communications, trusted intermediaries, and regular payments to those who carried out their orders. Alibadi, according to court proceedings, was one of those intermediaries. He was said to be in direct communication with the Hamads, relaying their instructions to individuals responsible for carrying out firebombings or delivering threats. In some cases, police alleged he provided targets with warnings before attacks, giving them a final chance to comply. This hierarchy, international organizers, local coordinators, and street-level enforcers, allowed the operation to expand rapidly. Within months, the network had extended its reach from metropolitan Melbourne to regional towns across Victoria. Some stores were attacked multiple times. Others simply shut down. What made this network particularly difficult to dismantle was the lack of loyalty to any single gang. Instead, it operated like a business alliance, with members from various ethnic and criminal backgrounds working together for profit. Some participants had links to outlaw motorcycle gangs. Others were tied to Middle Eastern organized crime groups or suburban crews already known to police. Alibadi's role, police alleged, was part logistics, part enforcement. He coordinated movements, communicated timing, and ensured orders were followed. He was also believed to be responsible for collecting money and passing it up the chain, a job that required discretion, trust, and a willingness to maintain silence under pressure. When police analyzed his finances, they found signs of money laundering. Cash was being filtered through different accounts, sometimes under fake names, and sometimes through businesses that had no real operations. It was enough to raise further suspicions about how deep the network's financial infrastructure ran. Investigators believed the network was structured to avoid detection, using burner phones, fake IDs, and false business fronts. But as the attacks grew in number and severity, it became impossible to stay invisible. Each fire left behind physical evidence. Each threat left a digital trail. Eventually, the people connecting the dots led back to Alibadi. His arrest and the evidence collected from his communications gave police a clearer view of how the organization functioned and who might be next. After months of investigation and surveillance, Majid Alibadi was formally charged and ordered to stand trial. The list of offenses was long and serious. 22 charges in total, including arson, reckless conduct endangering life, criminal damage, extortion with threats to destroy property, and dealing with the proceeds of crime. Prosecutors argued that Alibadi played a trusted and coordinated role in a criminal conspiracy that had spread fear across Victoria. He was described as a key link in a network that used firebombings and intimidation to force tobacco retailers into the black market trade. The trial was scheduled at the County Court of Victoria. In court, Alibadi appeared calm. Dressed neatly and speaking through his lawyer, he denied the allegations. His legal team pushed back against the prosecution's case, arguing that the evidence did not prove his direct involvement in any of the attacks. But the prosecution laid out a detailed timeline. They presented surveillance footage showing Alibadi meeting with known associates in the days before attacks. They showed images of luxury purchases, suggesting they were funded by illicit activity. They walked the jury through encrypted chats, many of them using coded language, that lined up with the timing of the arson incidents. The messages, prosecutors argued, showed not just awareness, but planning. They referred to specific streets, mentioned the condition of stores, and included directions for entering and exiting the scenes. In some cases, investigators had tied these messages to attacks that occurred within hours of their exchange. They also pointed to the way Alibadi lived. Despite not holding steady employment, he wore high-end designer clothing, frequented expensive restaurants, and drove or rented a series of luxury vehicles, including a Rolls-Royce. One transaction showed a single-day spending spree of $30,000 at a boutique fashion store. His defense countered that lifestyle choices were not proof of guilt. They argued that there was no direct evidence placing him at the scene of the fires, and that the messages presented in court could be interpreted in multiple ways. They also questioned the reliability of some of the surveillance methods used to monitor his activity. But prosecutors insisted that when viewed as a whole, the communications, the movements, the spending, the picture was clear. Alibadi was not just an associate, he was a central figure in the operation. The charges relating to arson were especially serious. In several cases, the fires could have endangered lives, particularly when they occurred near residential buildings or during business hours. Even if no one was hurt, the law still considers reckless conduct that could endanger life as a major offense. At the conclusion of the pre-trial hearings, the judge determined there was sufficient evidence to proceed to a full trial. Bail was denied. Alibadi remained in custody, awaiting the next phase of what had become one of the most high-profile organized crime cases in Victoria in recent years. The arrest of Majid Alibadi was a major milestone in Victoria Police's efforts to disrupt the violent campaign plaguing tobacco retailers across the state. But even with Alibadi behind bars, the attacks didn't stop. Within weeks of his arrest, more stores were firebombed. In one incident, a fire spread to an entire shopping strip, causing hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage. In another, masked men armed with bats smashed windows and left threatening notes taped to shop fronts. Police confirmed that the tactics remained the same: intimidate, destroy, and dominate. It became clear that Alibadi was part of a much larger machine, and that the network he was allegedly involved with continued to operate. The encrypted phones, rotating crews, and international connections made it difficult for police to trace the full scale of the operation. Investigators said that despite some successes, the black market tobacco trade was still growing. It remained one of the most profitable criminal markets in Australia, driven by high taxes on legal cigarettes and a steady demand for cheaper, untaxed products. For organized crime, it was low risk and high reward, and that made it hard to contain. In response, Victoria Police expanded Task Force Lunar. More officers were assigned, and federal agencies became more involved. A national intelligence sharing system was implemented to track similar attacks in other states, and customs authorities increased inspections of shipping containers and freight suspected of carrying illicit tobacco. The community, meanwhile, remained on edge. Store owners feared they could be next. Some refused to speak to police, worried that cooperating might make them a target. Others closed their doors permanently, unwilling to risk their lives or businesses over cigarettes. The courts continued to process a backlog of related cases. More arrests followed, including others who had allegedly worked alongside Alibadi. But even as charges piled up, the larger problem persisted. What made the situation more complex was the evolving nature of the conflict. The attacks weren't just about forcing compliance. They were also about revenge. Some were believed to be tit-for-tat strikes between rival syndicates vying for control of key supply routes and storefronts. As the underworld fractured, new players emerged, some of them younger and even more unpredictable. In this environment, figures like Majid Alibadi stood out not just for what they did, but for what they represented: a new generation of organized crime in Australia. Less concerned with tradition or loyalty, more focused on fast money and calculated violence. As Alibadi remained in custody awaiting trial, police warned that the battle was far from over. The war for control of the illicit tobacco market continued to smolder across Victoria's suburbs. One fire, one threat, one arrest at a time. Whether Alibadi was a key cog or just one of many will ultimately be determined in court. But for now, his name remains tied to one of the most destructive black market campaigns in recent Australian history.